All right, so we cut a bunch of cherry on the sawmill. Actually, we cut a bunch of other stuff. There were some big pine logs, there was some red cedar, but the cherry is kind of the focus right now. We've got to get that offloaded in the woodshed. So I'm back home where I store my wood, and it's time to do a little bit of a rodeo. This pile right here was cut about April or May, so something like 5 to 6 months ago, and it's been in here a long time. It's been in here that long drying. I haven't moved it, I haven't rotated. I come in here once in a while and add a little click to the straps. But what I'm curious about right now is how dry is this cherry and how dry is the cherry we just cut? Now those logs had been laying on the ground for about a year, so they've been drying a little bit, but actually logs don't dry really as much as you think they should. We've cut into 10-year-old logs that are still very wet inside. So I'm curious how much a freshly sawn log is and a 5 to 6 month air drying log stacked and stickered and ratchet strapped. I found that this ratchet strap helps keep a lot of my stuff from warping while it's drying. If you just let it sit there, it tends to have some stresses in it and just go. But if I strap it down and keep adding clicks to it throughout the time that it's drying, it tends to dry a lot straighter, and then there's a lot less waste when I go to joining and planing and stuff like that. So I need to get the straps off of this and dig down a little ways. You know, there's a junky walnut on here. I try to do that too. I save a really junky board to be on the top to put all the force of the strap on. We'll get that off of there and we'll dig down to the middle of this cherry pile. There's walnut on the bottom too, obviously. Get to the middle of this, see what this is, see if it's ready to move to unsticker and go stack regular style. And then we'll stack up the stuff that I brought home, throw it into this spot and ratchet strap and sticker it and all that. But we're really curious about, so let me put it this way. I have a pretty good general estimate about how long it takes stuff to dry in here. In a good hot, dry summer, I would be going from sawmill to using those boards in about 8 months in this room. We had a very, very wet summer wherein I actually had water standing on the floor in here. That was really bad. So I don't think this is going to be as dry as I'd like it to be. But what I want to do is get it down to more of a science. You know, if you have a kiln, you almost have to the date, to the hour, how long it has to be in there under heat, under pressure, depending on what you're doing to get a board from green to workable. I have an estimate. If I sawed stuff this weekend like I did, I wouldn't expect that stuff to be usable until about July of next year. So we're going from 6 to 8 months, sorry, not July. Yeah, 6 to 8 months over spring and 12 to 14 over winter and into summer, something like that. I'm just kind of speaking from memory right now. But anyway, the point here is I've got myself a new moisture meter. We're gonna test this thing out on here. I've given it a few tests on stuff in the shop and it gives me some really accurate readings. And then the other thing we're gonna do, where did I put those? I also got these smart loggers. So this is like a Bluetooth device that tests temperature and humidity in a space. And all I have to do is get close to it with my phone every day or every couple of days to collect a data point that the app in my phone will store. And it'll actually show me a chart of how the environment in this room is changing. And then I can probably track, as the stuff dries, what kind of season we have, what kind of week we have, what kind of month we have, and how this stuff is drying from then. So long term, I'd like to have a kiln. Short term, I'm trying to make this more accurate. So I'm going to get one of those hung up, maybe on the back wall, something like that. And then we're going to test this cherry to just give myself a baseline. Oh, I hate ratchet straps. These are the cheapest ones money can buy, and it shows. So the top of the pile is going to dry faster than the bottom or the middle. It's all going to be different depending on airflow, that kind of thing. So I need to get to one somewhere in the middle, which should probably be drying the slowest. And I might be wrapping this whole pile right back up the way it is. So rather than unstack everything really nicely, I'm just going to try to lift the whole thing off. There. So we're going to go for that test board right there. So this is a Wagner Orion 950 meter, and I already have it. Let's see, species. I have it set for the density of cherry, so we're good to go here. Put it on the board. I am getting a reading of 11.7. That is lower than I expected. Let's just try another one. 12.5, and then throughout different spots on this board, there was 10.3, 11.4, and this is actually a really nice meter. It will log different tests that I take. If I want it to store information, it can, and I don't know for sure. This might even talk to the same app that those smart loggers do, but I've got to do some reading before I understand all that. But that board is just about workable. Around here, if it's under 13, I'm pretty happy with it because this swampy state really likes to be wet. So there's 9.7 in the middle of that one. This board looks like an 8-quarter. That is 9.8 in the middle, 11.6 towards the end, which is usually that is uncommon. The one thing that's really interesting about this is that's why I'm picking these boards up most of the time when I'm taking my test, because this will read even deeper if you're not careful. So like if I test this spot, I have 10.4. If I hold my hand under it and test it again, I have 11.3. So it's actually getting some moisture from my hand in that same setting. If I take my hand out, 10.4 again. I think that's what I said the first time. Anyway, these are actually pretty darn close to dry. I don't need them anywhere else at this point. So I will probably just slide this whole pile over, get the new stuff back in that corner because that's like my long-term storage. Strap this back in, strap the new stuff down. Let's look and see what this stuff reads. So here's some cherry. This was cut 2 days ago. 24.2. And this is probably a 5-quarter. It's just a little bit thick. So it's flashing between 31 and 32, and 32 is the max. Beyond 32%, it's hard to be precise. 32% on a moisture meter is just saying it is as wet as you're going to be able to tell. You got to wait some time here. So 32. So I'm thinking I was just, because this is the top board on the top end, it's actually drying pretty fast from this face. 23.3 on the top, 32 maxed out on the bottom. That's real interesting. So anyway, this stuff is not dry, not even a little. Yeah, maxed out. The next board in the pile that has not seen wind or sun or airflow. 32 and 32 on both sides. So these are very wet. It's time to get them stacked up and put away. Like I said, this stuff is pretty darn dry as far as I'm concerned for this part of the world. The next thing I would do, if I was building something with it, is move it into my shop where I kind of keep it more climate controlled. There's an air conditioner, there's a furnace, there's a dehumidifier running most of the time. I will move it into there for a month before I end up using it. But for now, I think we're just going to stack this back up, and we'll even ratchet strap it back down because I have the room in here. It just doesn't really matter The new boards I'm stacking in here aren't going to take up that much space. And the other thing I'm going to do is flip the whole pile over as I go so that the bottom becomes the top. And then we'll test the bottom just a little bit to see what the moisture looks like down there on that walnut. Ouch. That's why I always wear gloves. Ooh. That went between the nail and the meat. Shoved a chunk of walnut bark underneath my cuticle. Not awesome. Yeah, it's the little one, but it stings, and there's definitely something in there. Yeah, that wasn't pleasant. Moving on. Gloves. All right, so it's a solid bunk. Let's flop it out of the way. And I'm not going to take this back apart. There's an air gap in here, so that's going to be good enough. 10.7, 11, 10.4, 13, 13, 14. So the air's not moving as much on that end as it is on this end, so I probably ought to get a fan in here just to help circulate things. That will make it not necessarily dry faster, but dry more evenly. Now it's time to unload the trailer before it starts raining on me. So I try to put the strap as close to the stickers as I can because I don't want to introduce some deflection down, you know, add warp to it. That wasn't just about to happen naturally. Put some pretty good torque on there. Nice and solid. There. So that's just not nearly as tight as that is, but it's tight enough that stuff pushing against it can't do much. There. Tucked away. It'll sit there just like that all winter. I'll still come out and add a click every once in a while because it will start to dry, but won't be nearly, I won't stab myself. Won't be nearly as dry as the last batch that cooked over the summer. So you can see there, we got cherry. Somewhere in there is a few pieces of oak, red oak right here, and then red cedar, and then cherry back on top. And so what's going on here is I always try to keep a junky piece. I showed you that on the underside of this one, I guess. I try to keep a junky piece so that the straps don't dig into and wreck a good board that's already got a good corner on it. Even though you're gonna run it over the joiner and the planer and you're gonna put corners back on it, this thick piece doesn't deflect nearly as much, and it's got a lot more material to lose when I do need to joint that, whereas this stuff that's cut at 4/4 will be destined to become 3/4, and if I lose 1/8 of that because I rounded over a corner or something, that kind of potentially wastes material. So I have a relatively junky board on the bottom where it doesn't matter what's happening to it. It's putting pressure throughout the stack over the stickers like this, and then the top is the heavy stuff because it's also using gravity to help add weight to the pile in addition to a ratchet strap. So I am hot and winded, and that is my air drying in a nutshell. I do need to figure out the app for these smart loggers and get one of them put up in here, and then the other one I'm going to put up in my shop and actually see what it looks like between the two. I assume that my shop is well climate controlled, but this will actually tell me to what extent that's accurate. And then yeah, keep using my moisture meter here. If you're in the market for a moisture meter, any of this sort of testing stuff, I will put a link in the description. They were sent to me by Wagner, so go support the companies that support people like me. It goes a long way. And that's enough rambling for one day. I do appreciate you watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this and learned something. Whether I'm doing it right or wrong, I don't know, but it's working for me. And this is what my process looks like. So yeah, I've got a pretty healthy looking wood shed right now. Let's just take a quick tour. This is all thick maple. That's what we just talked about, all this here. This is all, I think that is 5/4 walnut. That's 12 foot long. That is really, really nice lumber. There's a bunch of weird stuff up there and some weird stuff up there, but we've got maple and cherry and white oak and red oak and ash and black walnut and some hackberry, and this is poplar. This is a whole tree that was dead behind the wood pile back there, so we just cut that down and cut that up on the sawmill. Anyway, oh, that was the last thing I wanted to do. Glad I thought of that. Just to keep a log of something, today is September 18, maybe 17, I don't really know, it doesn't really matter. And I tested it at 32%, which is the max. So I'll come back in here and test this again and see, I'll mark down a date and a percent and see how it's trending downwards so that I can keep track of that in regards to what that smart logger is telling me about the environment in here. And as it's going into October and then winter, I don't expect this is going to go down very fast. But anyway, thanks for watching, guys. We will talk at you next time.